Oh, yeah, thank you, thank you. Yes, I mean, obviously, an event requires substances, but an event can't itself be a substance. But on the other hand, that's a really loose answer because everything requires, and if anything requires substance for it to be, because it's the fundamental level of being.
Right.
Then a political party or a company don't have substance. They are not substances either. They're comprised of substances, but they are not substances.
Right.
Because so a test for substance is whether it has unity.
Yeah, I mean, they're all human organizations, and so they're all built on human substance, and so their good is always going to be related to the intrinsic being of the human being, and so they're related to substance, obviously, and one can develop an ethics and a politics and integrate these kinds of human collectivities in those boundaries and judge them according to substance, but they're not themselves. I wouldn't say, I don't see any way to actually call them substances.
Is a beehive a substance?
Beeswax is.
The
No,
beehive.
the beehive
Yeah, the hive as a
has-
whole, as a
That's like
substance.
it's like that would be a house, right?
right.
No, I'm not talking about the physical
It
artifact.
has its
I'm talking
being
about
in
the-
another
Yeah.
because it requires the bee and its telos in order to be what it is. So
Well,
the
bees,
hive
do they
taken
have being?
abstract-
That's the one. To be a bee or not to be a bee.
There you go. There you
Oh,
go.
God, this is a bad path to start down this time of night.
Anyway,
So does
I think
anyone-
the humor does get better over the course of the evening.
What does
I was informing Isaac, the humor does get better.
that's a,
That's a
that's a
comforting thought.
promissory note. That's a
No.
promissory note that perhaps only you can keep.
Well, it has no substance to it. What can I say?
Does anyone know who this Tom guy is? Who's on in the meeting?
That's Tom Osk, right?
Oh yeah, Tom, he's good. He's good. He runs the Nick McKeon ethics group, and he's here more often than not.
Okay.
well, he usually has some pithy quote instead of a bird. So I'm disappointed.
Tom, that's a challenge.
Okay.
Well, since I heard my name, I'd like to take this opportunity to
Cool.
self-promote and promote a meeting of mine that will take place 1 week from now, same time as what is happening right now, to follow up on a topic that I thought about alongside what the reading today and for the last several months have been about in the metaphysics. And that is the topic of what ousia means to Aristotle. So I posted that on the meetup, and I hope some of you will be able to attend. It's the same time as right now, but next week. That's it.
Oh, ousia, that's a very minor concept. Why would you spend a whole meeting on that? Joke. Why don't you put that in the chat, Tom?
Okay, I will do that.
Please do.
Tom, as you may recall, this group meets a week from today.
Yeah, no, I'm going to bump it and keep us
Are you
on our
gonna bump
2-week
it?
schedule. Yeah, but so be ready. When I mess with Meetup and reschedule things, sometimes I have to immediately cancel them again. So expect a little bit of chaos from me in the next couple of days, and then the dust will settle, and I'll be back up on our 2-week schedule. And so next week would be Tom's at the same time for a more focused discussion on ousia and its various uses in I assume in the substance books, the books we're working on now, but maybe from other sources. And then next time we'll just pick up from wherever we leave off today.
And Tom, feel free to put that in the comments on the meetup page too for this group. Because
Okay, all right.
I'm sure you agree, Michael, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I love the fact that I have a fellow teacher of Aristotle in the meetup universe. It's very, very helpful.
I would only say that the idea from my end is that since all of you are interested in the topic of Aristotle, that it is to your
That's
interest
Tom picking
to
up, so it's not us.
it is to your interest to take certain initiatives to
When they let him in the room, he took him a long time.
to bring those ideas of yours to the foreground. So it's just one person interpretation, and maybe I like to hear your interpretation as well.
Cool. Can I ask, are you going to provide certain texts as the basis of your interpretation so that we could discuss them with you? Or is the idea that we just hear your thoughts about Usia and then work through those?
I hadn't thought of providing the text, but I can do that as well. But this has been brewing for, let's say, several months, and I can definitely provide the information. Mostly they're from the topics and the posterior analytics, but I can bring all those together.
Yeah. You should probably do it exactly the way you want it, but some of the text might be helpful so that we can think about them beforehand.
That sounds fantastic, Tom. Thanks for sharing this, by the way. We're the perfect group for you to tell us about this.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So I was actually kind of psyched to see that Nick was coming back, but he's not showing. And so I'm just going to launch into, as I am wont to do, a little recap. Oops, see. Let me see. Can I share screen? Because it's disabled. And Bo, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
I thought you would as co-host, but now I've allowed everybody. Go ahead.
All right. All right. Can everybody see that pretty well?
Very well. Good job.
All right, cool. So I just wanted to kind of just do a little flow chart, even though I don't really know what those look like. I've never been, but it seems like a good term for what I'm doing here. I wanted to get people up to speed that haven't been here for a while, but just about everybody has been here for a while. So I will rip through this pretty quickly. Please raise hands or just interrupt me if you want to make a remark or ask a question. But I did want to kind of show kind of the internal necessity of the path that Aristotle's taken, at least one way to look at that path. And it all starts with everything starts with the stuff we did in the physics, really. And so you see here in the diagram, I have a box entitled Nature, and in that box we have everything that changes, right? And we're not looking at each one of them individually. We're just looking at everything that changes and only think about them, not as like individual things, but just as changing things. And Aristotle, in order to avoid, as we've talked about innumerable times, right, the Parmenidean paradox that if being is, there is no such thing as change. Change is an illusion. Right? Aristotle makes the remark in that only makes sense if you think of change as something becomes something, and like hot becomes cold. In the cold, there's nothing left of hot, and or the other way around, from cold to hot. A hot is not itself cold. If you think about change that way, what happens is you don't have one thing undergoing change, but you have one thing passing out of existence and another thing coming into existence. And that, Aristotle says, doesn't capture what we mean by change, which is that there's something underlying, something that undergoes the change, okay? So his thought is, if you want to think change, you have to think it through three principles, but we're only really talking about two: matter and form. And matter is the answer to the question, what is it that changes? what is it that changes? That is what the term matter refers to. Form is just, what is it? What is it that has, what is it at the culmination of its change, right? It's, so if it's becoming hot, right, at the end it's hot and we can call it a hot thing. What is it? It's hot. Okay, so everything that changes is thought through matter and form. And so everything that changes is thought through two principles. And that's why we call everything that changes composites, right? Because you have to think them through two separate principles. And so they are one thing that gets thought through two separate principles, matter and form. And that's their compositeness. They're not composites because they have a piece of them is matter and another piece is form. These are not descriptions of pieces of things. They refer to how these things have to be thought if you want to capture their changingness. So they're being things that change. All right. And so Aristotle is starting off in these substance books and asking. So we start talking about substance and in the categories, and we gave examples of this horse and this man as substances. Men, or human beings, and horses, animals, they change, right? So they're natural beings, and so we think them through matter and form. And so they're in their how do you say that? Principally composite, right? So he gives us a bunch of criteria. He's been giving us many criteria for substance, this word substance, and we always have to remember it just means being, right? What is the being of the changeable thing? And in order to think the changeable thing, we have to think, we think matter, form, and then we think them together, and that's the composite. So his question is, all through this book that is so torturous, right? So what is the being of a changeable thing? Is it the matter? Is it the form? Or is it the composite? And the criteria he's been giving of being, substance, I've listed here in parentheses under which is substance. It's separable, it's determinate, it's a this something, it's not predicable of another, and it answers the question, what is it? Okay. So, right, okay, I think everybody understands that. And in Zeta 3, if we go to the left part of the page here, we look at matter. Is matter is a candidate for substance? Why? Well, because we attribute forms to matter. When we say, this thing gets cold, this thing gets hot, this thing becomes pale, we're attributing a form to the thing that's changing, and that is what we've been calling matter. So it seems like matter is the underlying subject, and we say, the hot thing becomes cold, and so we're attributing forms to the underlying matter. So it seems like the underlying matter, or the subject, as it's called, would be substance. And Aristotle shows that if you take all the qualities away from that which undergoes change, you do not get at a this something. It's not determinate, and it's not separable. All the criteria of being a substance are not met by this qualityless, formless thing that we have concocted in our imagination by imagining what it would be by withdrawing all the forms, right? So what we get is indeterminacy, right? Nothing in particular. And that disqualifies at this juncture matter. So he goes to look at form, and form is complicated, as you well know. So now if we go to the right-hand side of the diagram, we have, so if we go, we look at form, and we have some options about what form is, and he gives them to us early on, right? It's genus, it's universal, it's essence. And so if we look at the no side, form is said of matter. It is the matter that lacks and gains forms, right? And so here form is the universal in this acceptation of form. And so form is always said of an underlying subject. And this notion of form, the universal, does not qualify as the being of the thing. It's dependent. And that's probably one of the things that's most important in this whole book, this whole book 7, is that whatever substance is, it's not dependent on anything else for it to be what it is.
Book 7 is a
Zetas.
commentary, not this.
Oh yeah. What? Pardon me?
Sorry, you said book 7. Is that
Oh, that's Zeta. Yeah. Mhm.
okay?
Yeah, the one we've been working on. Right. Okay, and then that, and we have another no. Some of this might be anticipatory, but and that's this, that he is suggesting that maybe genus is the substance, and we have a fairly good textual basis for thinking that genus must be substance, because in Zeta 12, he says that there is a way for the definition to be one, even though it looks like it has parts, and that is if the definition is in the genus species form. Right, so we go from animal to footed to two-footed, and then to cloven-footed, or four-footed and cloven-footed. This kind of way of thinking about the unity of a thing, that which makes it a substance. It seems like, since we've just brought in genus and difference and species, that that these together would constitute the substance of something, and we will see, I think, we'll get to it, that he denies this, right? And I wrote here, genus and the difference, right, is how you define a species, right? Human being is defined as a two-footed animal, a rational animal, right? Genus and difference. And Aristotle tells us that genus and difference are what the species divides into. They are its matter. But matter is indeterminate with respect to itself. Hence my arrow pointing back to matter. So in our investigation of the form, we began by separating matter and form. But then as we get deeper into form, we discover that there is a kind of matter that inhabits form, right? And that must be, we must make that distinction when we're looking for being, looking for substance. So that's some of the stuff we're going to cover today in Zeta 13 through 16. And as we see a little bit farther up here, up to the right-hand side of the screen, we do have an affirmative answer, essence. And well, what's translated as essence. And he gives us his initial definition of that as what something is in respect of itself, okay? So part of what we're trying to do is really trying to understand, what is it to say of something that it is in respect of itself? Because certainly, if it's in respect of itself, it's not dependent on anything else for it to be what it is. It will have parts, it will have matter, but these are all integrated into its being what it is. And this is certainly
so when you say just the phrase in respect of itself, is that the same as in respect to itself?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, I assume so. It's not, it sounds like it's not different than what I'm trying to get at here. But it's the basis of a distinction that's all the way through everything we've been reading. That which is what it is through another, and that which is what it is through itself, or in respect of itself. And we were we were introduced to this distinction in the categories when we started talking about the difference between substances and accidents. And we had the initial plausibility of this distinction and the idea that, or Aristotle's thought that there would be no qualities like pale and musical, or no quantities and relations, if there weren't things that could have these qualities and quantities and relations as properties. And so qualities, quantities, relations, and the other categories are all dependent. They have their being in another, namely substance. Without substance, they would not be. And so that was one of the first that's one of the first criteria of what a substance is that which everything else is able to inhere in or be a property of.
So can I get clarity on this? So I see, according to your diagram, essence or substance is on the side of form rather than the side of matter.
Right.
But is essence dependent on matter to be form?
Can you explicate that a little bit more?
Well, I'm just kind of going back to Philip's questions before, because he was talking about things like beehive,
Right.
and they have a form in terms of meaning and definition.
Yeah.
But they don't have any substance because they are, well, okay, well, that just kind of answered my question. They are parts. But what is it that differentiates an undifferentiated form or essence from, I don't know. I guess I don't get my question.
Okay. So are you thinking are you thinking about essences as like disembodied Platonic forms?
Yeah, I guess that is kind of what it gets to. Like what constitutes, what's the difference between that and an essence that is of some being? Like what's the difference?
Right. And I think that that's a lot of what Aristotle's effort is through this book that makes it very confusing. And it's precisely in order to answer that question. And I can only even, I can't really even broach it except to say that, there is this linguistic, there's this linguistic homonymy going on here, right? That you're actually putting your finger on, right? The Platonic form, the form is in Greek eidos, right? And that is often what Platonic ideas are referred to, right? And Aristotle is talking about form as in contrast with matter, using the same Platonic term eidos, and which he sometimes contrasts with Platonic ideas. Finally, eidos is Aristotle's term for species, as contrasted to genos or genus. So eidos is both, it refers ambiguously sometimes to a Platonic idea, sometimes to an Aristotelian form, and sometimes to his species concept. And that is why I think a lot of what he has to say about form is going to sound kind of like a Platonic idea, because he's distinguishing it from matter. And that raises the question, and I think your question is the Aristotelian essence separable the way a Platonic idea is separable, having an independent existence?
Is that why Aristotle's going on about separability so much, because he's trying to be anti-Platonic? Or is that part of it?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So Tim, is that correct? Is your thought, okay, if it's separate from matter, it must exist independently of matter? And so
Exactly,
then-
exactly. That is exactly my question, because what is it dependent on that makes it actual substance? Or really, it's the same way as asking the question, what is the difference between a Platonic form or an idea
Mhm.
and a form that is substance? And it seems to me as though matter sort of is at least associated with that difference, according to how I'm trying to piece it together anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So doesn't Aristotle say roughly that there is no real form without it being inhering in some matter or something? It's only formed matter. And Plato wanted to throw the form up there by itself independently of the matter. Or am I missing something?
I think that's the right direction. I don't think that's the last word though. But yeah, I think, yeah.
Others got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see any hands. I've got everybody reduced.
Go
All
ahead.
right, Tyler, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I didn't. I've got to. I see your faces again.
No worries. I could have just spoken
Yeah,
whenever.
yeah. Please do.
So I think if we have things that change, they're going to require matter in some sense. For
Right.
something that has a telos, or something that is in respect to itself, seems to always require matter in its account.
Mm-hmm.
However, the account of it is sort of irrespective to the accidentality of matter.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no in respect of itself to matter. Matter is always
Yeah.
in
True.
relation to something that changes.
So yeah, no, I think that's right, and it just brought me to the thought that one of the things that Koosman's very good at is reminding us essences and the things they're essences of are sometimes separate and sometimes not. And he says everything that changes everything that changes can, if it's the right kind of thing, have multiple levels of being. It will have a substantial level insofar as it's being what it is, right? It is material, but it's being what it is, right? What it is to be that thing. The essence is not the material. And we know this basically from the simple idea that the idea of the house, right, or the form of the house can be in all sorts of different materials, right? So it's not the material that constitutes the house. Yet there is no house without material, right? And so all beings that change, of all beings that change, some are substantial being, and they will have multiple levels of being in them, right? They will be constituted by essence as well as by all the various accidents that essence is capable of. And I'm underlying capable, right? Because this is all leading towards book 9, where we get the idea that what the essence is not an abstract Platonic form, which are all universals, which is what we're going to talk about today, right? But what he calls energia, right? It's activity. And so there's a specific activity that makes a horse a horse. And it's not, and that activity is in lots of different matters. So it's not the matter that makes the horse. And yet that activity is nowhere else than in those matters, right? It doesn't have a disembodied existence. So so that's where Aristotle is leading us to grasp. And he's doing that through all these very subtle distinctions. So that was
Philip has his hand up, and I love Koosman's distinctions about activity, by the way. But Phil, go.
very powerful.
So the essences they are in itself. because they're not necessarily reflexive. They're not necessarily for itself. They're essences that are not for itself.
Ah, okay, we got a little Hegel going on here.
Isn't for itself the same thing as being per se, respect to itself?
Yeah, but we can. Yeah, but we
I
don't
think
want
of for itself as being reflexive.
Yeah, we don't want to think. We don't want to introduce reflexivity here yet.
No, right. There's no,
right.
right. Okay.
Exactly, because the horse never intends his or her horseness, right? And therefore it can't fail to be a horse. So that reflexivity is not part of its being what it is. So we want to avoid that. There are levels of reflexivity here, but I don't think it's there. I'm just going to say, but that might be too complicated. Right. So that will perhaps be, we'll be enlightened on that a bit when we get to theta. What I was looking for is just to kind of break this down into the steps more or less that we've taken, that everything takes and everything flows from that initial grasp of what it is to be a changeable being. And he's mentioned several times, that the whole inquiry is towards the question, right? Are there separable forms?
Mm-hmm.
Are there eternal beings? Right? So, but we need the right distinctions. We got to get our distinctions right, and we got to understand what it means to be separable, and to be substance, and to be essence. And we have to work through the distinctions that give each one of these their specific determinacy to see whether they lead us to a positive or a negative judgment about eternal, self-subsistent, non-material substances that are nevertheless this somethings.
But substance and essence are not different types of being, are they? I mean, are there substances that don't have essences?
No.
Oh, the diagram. Okay, all right. The
Right.
diagram
No, you're right.
indicates that, right?
So we're investigating form. And form's a general and ambiguous concept, and he's going through different senses of form, and discovers in this notion of essence to be a promising candidate for substance. Now, it is how we have to think about changeable things. But if we want to ask what wherein their being consists, essence proves to be the most promising, but it's still a vague notion without too much contour. We know it's through itself. It's being through itself, and we don't know that much more about it at this point.
Well, can we say that you do have the word composite on your diagram,
right?
And I'm kind of thinking maybe that composite is the being, this being, and so that matter is essential to being, but form is what is the account of the being,
right?
And the essence is in respect to itself. The account is in respect to itself, but it requires substance to be being. So the form is not in respect to matter, but it is only in respect to itself. But there is this dependence on the account to be the account of something, and it's not quite setting right with me.
Right.
But there's I've got this relationship between the essence and matter is got to be more clearly defined for me.
Right. Well, let's see where we go. Right. He's not done with matter. As a matter of fact, the next book, Ada, actually is largely about the composite. Okay, so we'll get and really we talked about that several weeks ago, and but his whole focus on the snub nose, right? Or snubness, right? As something that whose substance. Well, I mean, I don't. It's hard for me to say that.
Can I throw
Yeah, go
something
ahead.
in
Yeah,
here?
go ahead. Go ahead. While I get my thoughts together.
So I'm thinking in terms of the Phaedo, where Plato or Socrates discusses eating, right? So, or eating and then flesh. So in order to achieve its ends, a kind of being has to have a relation to matter and take matter into itself and undergo changes. But of course, there's no specific matter that defines what it is as a kind of being, which is to say, so human beings have to eat some kind of material, right? They have to undergo material changes to become or to move towards their ends. However, the specifics of what matter, right, is to some extent accidental. It doesn't tell us what the being of the human being is to appeal to the specific diet that they happen to have. So an account of a human being is not going to treat the matter that they take in or lose as essential, even though, of course, having a relation to matter is necessary for them to become what they have the potential to become in respect of themselves.
Right, and you know, we don't want to get. I agree with Tyler's presentation, and I'm not disagreeing with anything. I'm just bringing up the point that we have to remember always, you know, the question that the answer matter answers is, what is it that changes? And it's not some independently existing chemical, physical building blocks that everything is composed out of, the way we think of matter, right? And so, you know, mathematical entities, for instance, assuming it's even appropriate to call them entities, don't change. And so there is no matter that is required to think them, even though, you know, he does say that, you know, this other dimension of matter is that which something, if you divide it, you know, those parts that you divide it into are its matter, right? Because you changed it, right? like what did I have here? Right, like the genus and differences, right? If you break the species down into its parts, you have genus and difference, and they are thereby its matter, right? But that's not a physical or chemical thing that has independent existence. That's the one thing. And matter is absolutely essential to Aristotle, but it doesn't have any independent existence. It is always relative to the forms that inherit it.
Oh, that's awesome. Charles has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that
Please.
talking about essence and substance are talking about the same thing, but from a different point of view. You're just describing something, it's a different way of describing the same thing. The substance really refers, I think, to the matter and the form and the notion of change, and they are separable. If they were not separable, you couldn't have change. They need to be separable in order that one thing can become another. A form can go out of matter, another form can come into it. And then each time with each set of matter and form, once they are together, you have an essence, and that essence is a description of, or it is the word act that Michael used a while ago. It is the act of the substance being what it is.
Right.
It's the I don't know if you could add the word purpose there or not. I don't know if that would be appropriate, but the essence is talking about a substance in the aspect of exactly what is this substance? What is it? We know it's matter and form. We know that they are separable in the act of change. We know they come together, etc. But once they are there, what is it actually?
Right.
And then that's when you talk about the essence.
Right.
So you talk about, I think you just talk about the same thing, but from two different aspects of it would be my comment, but I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Everything's helpful, and this is why it's good that next week Tom's offering a seminar on ousia, so we can hash out some more of these understandings against a background of perhaps a richer a textual basis rather than just the metaphysics.
Well, I would think that substance is kind of the angle of the concept substance is getting at the underlying thing that underlies the accidents, whereas essence is more, it is ousia, and it's the being, the true being that doesn't change in its being, it doesn't change. So, you know, in terms of its account of what it is, doesn't change. And that is the underlying substance, but that substance kind of highlights that it's not the accidents, it's the underlying thing, whereas being has to do with its account's unchangingness, that it remains the thing it is, regardless, and it's kind of apart from any changes. Its account is its account, no matter irrespective of change, I guess.
Well, I think that's accurate, that when you talk about the essence, you are talking about what the thing actually is, what the substance actually is. And then you're not talking about the change that brought it about or the change that will cause it to no longer be. You're talking about the moment of what it is and what really makes it to be what it is.
Well, can I ask, is that really, do beings go into and out of essences, or is being the essence itself? So that's another question I have. When we're talking about change, we're not talking about a substance going in and out of forms, right? Because that would then make substance more basic than essence, which isn't really the concept, right? Because essence and substance are the same thing.
Right.
And substance is not matter. So it's not like, but change is necessary, or matter is necessary to change, and matter is the thing that changes, but matter is not the form, is not the substance, is not the being. So it can't change, right? I guess.
What can't change?
The form or the essence or the substance.
I mean, you know, if we think about a changing thing, right? Something becomes hot, and then something becomes cold, right? These are formal qualities that it acquires and loses. So they obviously can't be its substance. So what we're kind of looking at, and now the thing, insofar as it takes on these accidental properties, is matter, and that's why we call this, you know, this thing we say we attribute form to that which changes, and we attribute lack of form to that which changes, right? Because without the lack of form, without the lack of heat, it can't get hot. Right, but now, but we're looking at it now slightly different, right? When we're looking at its substance, right? So the question, so there is that which undergoes the change, and that's matter, and that is indeterminate. It doesn't have any form, so it can't be the substance. So there's more to the thing than the matter and the accidental properties that matter can gain and lose. And that which is over and above belongs to the thing is its substance. And so now we're not talking about forms that can gain or lose, but a different sense of form, namely that which accounts for or causes the thing to be the same in all of its changes, in all of its material changes.
Right.
And that's so to speak, that's what the matter itself belongs to. And so there is a sense, although only a sense, in which, you know, the matter is predicated of that, but that's actually misleading formulation. So I like to think of it this way, right? Anything that, okay, so you've got your thing and you've got the hot and cold that you attribute to it. Anything you can attribute to a thing is going to be an accidental predication, right? Anything that can come and go, right? But there's also conceptual distinctions that get at what that thing is that remains itself through all of these changes, and that's not its matter. And so, and it's also not something we can predicate of it. It doesn't come to it from outside because it's already that thing. When anything else is predicated of it, it's already that. Right. So, I mean, however you want to say this, you know, I look at this as kind of the basis for the later the idea of an analytic judgment. We, you know, there are some thought processes are a predicate to a subject, and some elicit the inner nature of the subject, and that's not predicating anything of it. Right. In the literature, they talk about exemplification, for instance, and other words as something other than predication. So predication is only going to get us so far. There are going to be properties of this thing that make it the thing that they are. And to say them is to say the essence. It is what it is to be that thing. And in Zeta 12, he gives us the idea that, you know, it's the ultimate difference, that which, you know, that if you think of your thing in terms of the genus it belongs to, and you go down and you make all the appropriate distinctions of that genus, you get to a point where if you divide it anymore, it's not going to be a member of that genus anymore. So if your genus is the animal, right, you can go so far in your distinctions before and there's going to be a point in which your distinctions are no longer distinguishing animals, but parts of animals or carbon molecules in animals or something like that, right? So he says there's going to be an ultimate difference. And saying that difference, thinking that thing as that difference, that ultimate difference, is saying what it is that makes it one thing. And as it happens, there is always going to be, at least in changeable things, some material aspect to that ultimate difference. And so matter is always going to belong to the thing, right? So we never get disembodied Platonic forms. But the question is, how do we approach it in such a way that we don't dissolve it into a bunch of arbitrary properties, but that we, in the way in which we think it, through the genus and species, and dividing that down right and getting the distinctions right, we get at that ultimate difference that is one character, but it is a intensive character because it contains all those distinctions within its being, right?
Okay. So you said all that, right? So you said that almost as though you were responding to me, but That's what I was trying to say, that we're not, the form is the human, right? So the form is the human. So when we're talking about change, we're not talking about changing from a human into, you know, a snake or into a rock or something like that. So there are changes. The human does lift its arm and lower its arm, but that's change. That's not a change of form in terms of its essence.
Right.
So the essence is in respect to itself always the same. The human is the human. But then there are this other idea of form, which is not the essence, which is somehow related to the substance. And maybe this other idea of form is how the essence is related to matter. I don't know, but anyway, that's just what I mean. I guess I heard you, Charlie, speaking in such a way as though, you know, there was this substance that was going in and out of forms, but as though, you know, that may be the form of the movement of the human, you know, raising its arm and lowering its arm. But that's a different notion of form than the essence, which is always the same. It doesn't change ever, because the human is the human. And if you fossilized the human, it wouldn't be a human anymore, because a human is not a fossilization.
No, that's
Go ahead,
correct.
Charlie, and then Tyler.
I just, the way you put it is what I meant, I think. I didn't mean that, for example, if a human being is sitting still and then they raise their arm, the form changes. It doesn't at all. The way you put it is that the essence is something in and of itself. And once the essence is established, so to speak, once it's there, it doesn't change until there is what you call a substantial change. And in substantial change, that's when you get a form, the form of human. For example, the living human would become a corpse, or or what, the limb, the tree limb becomes ashes in the fire. When you have a substantial change like that, then you're talking about the same thing, matter and form, talking about a substance, talking about a change, but the end result is going to be a different essence.
Is that
Okay,
really,
I get it.
is that really substantial change? Is that, I mean, the loss of your form, of your energeia, or your function, that's not, is that a substantial change, or is that going from being a substance to not being a substance?
Wouldn't that be the same thing?
Well, if you don't have a substance, it's not a change of substance. It's the, you know, earlier we talked
Oh,
about,
right. You're not going from one substance to another, but you're going from substance to non-substance.
right. He always talked about dissolving into
Right.
its material components or something like that.
Right. That's why if you chop a human being up in two, it's not a human being anymore.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a different substance. What you have is merely.
Right. I'm just saying that
Right.
the term substantial change seems like you're going from one substance to another, which was exactly the Parmenidean problem, right?
Yeah, well,
Exactly. That's very
been my
interesting.
understanding.
And I'm just going to say Aristotle has not introduced that term at all. So that's coming in from outside. Although it's relevant, but we don't have any textual basis for interpreting it. So there was Tyler and then Philip.
Yeah, I just kind of got distracted by that. I think Peter is right that it's not a change from one substance to another, but rather a change from substance to something like material. I think if we, oh yeah, okay. So what I was going to say is, I think there's matter in terms of what changes, but then if we ask the way something then we have to deal with form. But I think we have to deal with form and activity in a different way. So activity is a kind of relationship to matter, but that cannot be explained through matter alone. So the way in which something changes cannot be appealed to you can't appeal to what changes to explain the way something changes. So why does a living being change in one way rather than another? That's going to have to do with form and activity, which require matter, but which are never explained in terms of matter alone. So taking in different kinds of material while remaining the same form that's sort of independent of that material or accidental to that material has to do with the kind of being that it is. So in order for something to have a relationship to material as food, right, it has to be a living being. So fruit is not food to an artifice. It's food only to an organic being, for example. So maybe that helps, maybe that doesn't, but I wanted to throw that in there.
Thanks, Tyler. Philip, you're up.
So I have a question and a comment. So the question is, are there any perceptible wholes which are not substances? The question. Comment is, for Aristotle, temporality is a consequence of matter, a change. Change is not embedded in temporality. Change creates temporality.
How do you think perception deals with wholes?
Succession?
What is a perceptual whole rather than some other? I mean, is perception at the level that you even get holes?
Well,
Yeah,
we have, I mean, Aristotle's primarily talking about perceptible substances at this point. So I'm just wanting to restrict it. I don't want to talk about mathematical substances and whether or not they're wholes. I just don't want to talk about that right now.
Right.
I'm just talking about, like, are a substance and a whole, those turn out to be equivalent categories.
I'm kind of thinking that perception is not the right angle for the question, because I almost think he's whether he's not talking about what is perceptible, but what is thinkable, because perception almost implies an empirical approach, but he's definitely not being an empiricist here. He is thinking about the conception of what something is. So it's more conceptual than perceptual.
Yeah, I agree with Tim. I think so. Let's say I see Tim right now. Do I see the whole of Tim? I don't think so.
So Aristotle uses that phrase, perceptible substances.
Right.
And there's several times where he says, well, we're going to start talking about perceptible substances and kind of leave the mathematical on the side. So I was just trying to follow his, you know, I'm not saying that we perceive the whole of Tim.
Right.
Tim's a perceptible substance. We cognize the whole of Tim.
But we're still trying to figure out why Tim's a substance.
Yes, we are.
And
We know why Tyler's a substance, just not Tim.
right. And remember, you know, we're not talking about any change. We're talking about natural things, and they have a principle of change in themselves,
Yes.
right? And so that's why, for instance, a perceptual object like house can change, but it doesn't change through itself or in respect of itself, and it's not a substance. right? And so the only examples we have to go on substance is really are organisms, and for a while, the fundamental elements of the cosmos: earth, air, fire, water. Right? Those are the only candidates thus far, and he's even gonna lose those cosmological elements, right? So we just got organisms as examples of substance.
Yeah,
But
I do think
and his
that
claim, I'm just going to say, his claim is not that their only organisms are substance, but that in them we can recognize the difference between it being something or other and it being what it is. And that is the salient distinction. That's the essence versus yeah, the TSD, just the what it is. Anyway, yeah. So Tyler, I'm sorry, I bulldozed you.
no. I think, yeah, I think that's why I brought up sort of the way things are. So in order for something to have its own way of being, it has to be what it is in respect to itself in a way that
Right.
artifice won't be, and elements won't be in the same sense that an organism is. So the way that Tim is being Tim is perceptible, but it's not reducible to perceptions. I think that was my reason for sort of questioning Philip on the perception aspect. Because it's not like I can see Tim's way of being Tim in any given perception, but of course the reason that I see the kinds of things I do when Tim acts is due to Tim's way of being a human being.
Right. Well, I had more to introduce, but that already took an hour and 15 minutes. So I think I'm just going to go to the text now.
No, I'm fine if you go back to what you were introducing. I was really.
That's nice of you. I'll do it another time. There's plenty of time for it, but we do it. I'm counting on all of you to have read some of this text. I want to do justice to that. All right. So let me see. In Zeta 12, he introduces the idea of genus and species, right? And he gets at the idea of an ultimate difference as that in which a thing is defined, and that's what you get its substance, right? But he doesn't tell you how. He just says, that is how we can understand if substance is that in virtue of which something is one thing, and the account, which is the same as the form, is in many words. How can we say, right? This is something the moderns are very worried about. How can we say the essence? The essence is one, but the language, the words are many. And he basically says, that he basically says that you can reduce it down to one word if you can get that ultimate difference into one word, because that ultimate difference is going to contain all the distinctions that led to it as one thing, right? So this genus species thing is a kind of unity that is in harmony with the unity of substances that are brought about by their substance. Okay, so that brings us to genus species. And so now he begins to look at universals, because genus, you can't run around and find an animal, so it's got some other status than horses and cats. So, and it's something that's said of many things, and that elicits the thought process of, is animal like a Platonic idea? So ultimately, we have to now investigate that. So there's a lot in these sections, and they're somewhat overwhelming to me. So because there's a lot we could go into, so I'm kind of dependent on you pointing out some stuff that you want to talk about or that you really found quizzical, so we as a group can discuss it a little bit. But to start off with, let's just find out what characteristics he attributes to being a universal, right? We think we know what that is, but that's not necessarily what he has in mind. So let's let him explain it. So could I get a reader to start us off? Yeah, just go ahead and read 4 or 5 paragraphs so we can collect the various characteristics of the universal that he is going to argue against.
I suppose I could read.
I appreciate it, Tyler. Okay, just starting at the Z13.
Since, however, it is with substance that the investigation is concerned, we should return to that. Just as the underlying subject and the essence are said to be substance, so also is the universal. Now, about 2 of these which we have already spoken, namely about the essence and the underlying subject, and said that it underlies in 2 ways, either by being a this something, as the animal underlies its attributes, or as the matter underlies the actuality. But the universal too seems to some people to be most of all a cause, and the universal most of all a starting point. So let us return to that too. For it seems impossible for any of the things said of something universally to be substance. For first, the substance of each thing is special to it, in that it does not belong to anything else. A universal, by contrast, is something common, since that thing is said to be universal, which naturally belongs to many things. Of which, then, will it be the substance? For it is either the substance of none or of all. And it cannot be the substance of all. But if it is the substance of one, all the others will be this one as well. For things whose substance is one and whose essence is one are also themselves one.
That's a pretty dense argument. Let's stop there and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what he's arguing in that paragraph.
To begin with, if I may,
Yeah.
what exactly constitutes a universal?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, and that's what we're going to do now is we're going to assemble the characteristics that he thinks characterizes the universal and that he's going to reject as an account of substance. So the very first thing he said, he gives us a couple in this paragraph. So I'm going to point these out, and these are independent of the argument he gives. And like I said, I also want to hear your thoughts on the argument. But he says a universal is something common. Okay, so that's our first predicate we have. What is a universal? It's common. Now, he's not talking about independent existence or any of the stuff that we associate with play. It's just common. Since that thing is said to be a universal, which naturally belongs to many things. Okay, so now we have a second determination. Belongs to many things. It's common. It belongs to many things. Those are the first 2 characteristics he gives of a universal. And that's still kind of quizzical, right? I mean, we don't really quite know what he's after, but we don't want to put words in his mouth. And so, because ultimately he's got to distinguish the Aristotelian form from the Platonic universal, and that's tricky. And so that's why we have to pay very close attention to what it is he's criticizing about the universals and how he's getting them into view. So yes, something common, all right? What makes it common? It naturally belongs to many things. And this already disqualifies it. So now comes the argument. And I'm going to give you all the floor to see what you can make of that argument, see if you can put your finger on the salient point. Or show me what the salient point is.
Well, substance is some unique thing, and the universal is the opposite.
Right.
Well, I think in
That's
lines,
long and the short of it.
lines 10, 11, and 12, he kind of indicates why the universal cannot be a substance. The universal is common and is universal which naturally belongs to many things, of which then will it be of which of these many things will it be the substance? For it is either the substance of none or all, and it cannot be the substance of all. For if it is the substance of one, all the others will be this one as well. For things whose substance is one and whose essence is one are also themselves one. And he's emphasized up to this point that it's back in the very beginning in the categories. The substance does not inhere in anything.
Right.
It is said of itself. But a universal is said of many things. So therefore, a universal can't be a substance.
And yeah, exactly. So that tells us what, and so let's rehearse that argument because he often says, you might not notice it, but the way you're talking turns everything into one big thing. That's often a critique he makes of lots of different thinkers, and it's good for us to learn that argument because we do it too. So, does anybody else want to, or whoever's? Let's talk about that some more. Why does everything become one?
Well, if it was strong enough, if the universal is shared amongst many things, and it's strong enough to make some one random of those things a substance,
right?
Well, why doesn't it make all of those things that same substance?
Right. So, can you cash that on an example, like just with some quality or something?
Blue, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
If my blue coffee, if the blue made my coffee was somehow substantial to my coffee mug, well, then my blue book would also be, it would, and a substance is some one thing. So if a blue book and a blue coffee mug would all of a sudden be the same thing because they have
exactly
substantial blue to them.
Exactly. I mean, it's important to bring out the absurdity of what we're committing ourselves to if we think substance as something universal. Now, I'm just going to pause this for a second and ask the question: what, in your consciousness or your awareness, does this create a problem for Aristotle's whole theory of science and metaphysics?
I would say no, because I mean he's dispensed with matter as substance, right? So matter is
you're taking that very hard, Tim. You're taking that very hard.
well, what I'm saying is matter is that universal, right? That everything can be reduced down to. You could, if you took matter as substance, as the substance, it is the universal that everything in that concept belongs to. So the fact that Aristotle kind of sets matter aside from the essence of something means that he has avoided that problem.
Well, matter is completely indeterminate, has no essence. It can't be the substance of anything.
Well, no, and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's what he has done.
Right.
And that is the concept of matter within an Aristotelian world, as opposed to, let's say, the empirical world that we live in now, where matter is conceived of as the substance of all things.
World can never be an empirical concept.
What can be?
World.
Okay. So the point is interesting, but it's kind of meta, because no Platonist would ever think that would call matter, for instance, a universal. And so he's going after the Platonists. So if we just think of like animal or something like that, or any the kind of typical universal blue or animal or something like that, and try to work through this in a little bit more detail in a kind of a classic Platonic way, maybe the force of the argument will be made even more apparent.
Well, why I don't quite get the blue example, because there are things that are red. So you're not reducing everything to one. You're only reducing blue things to one,
Right.
and you're only reducing red things to another thing. So you've got two things there.
But every universal has that characteristic.
Exactly.
Since everything. So if you're not blue, all the red things are the same, and all colored things are going to be the same, and then et cetera,
I
right?
see.
Well, he uses also, I think he uses one as well as properties as a way of illustrating this. So if we take things in general as one thing, another thing, etc. So the one has a certain universality, but if everything that we say is one is therefore the same substance, right? We go back to that Parmenidean trap, where everything that is distinct as one is the same one thing.
Right. Right. So everything blue in in Peter's example, it's just the same thing. They've all been sucked up into the one blue that they are. If the universal blue were the substance, right? And
But
And so-
I'm not sure that the blue is a good example of a universal.
excellent.
It-
Yeah.
The universal is pretty much identified with, say, the genus. For example, animality or
Mhm.
humanness
Right.
or plantness,
Good.
something of that sort. And blue is an accident of all those, and a non-determining accident
enough.
in regard to their essence or in regard to what kind of a substance they might be. And so when we're talking about a universal here, Aristotle is raising the question, can animality, for example, the genus of animal, and you have this universal, this idea of animality in which all animals participate and how you can define them all.
Right.
Is that animality itself a substance?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, no, because it can't be. Because each substance is not said of another, but animality is said of all animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a common thing.
Right.
And that if you would say that animality is a substance and it is maybe one substance, then all the other substances have to be that one.
Right.
They all have to be the same thing.
The exact same thing, right?
Yeah.
Not the same type, but the same token.
Yeah, the
To
exact
use that
same
language.
item. Yeah.
Right, exact same item, right? We're comfortable with goats and humans being animals. In that sense, they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. But that's only the same type of thing, not the identical same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that would be the result. Peter, you did show your hand before Philip. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just saying that I'll agree that Charlie does point out an interesting distinction between something that's a truly substantial universal, as it were, and versus an accidental thing like blue.
Right.
And presumably blue is accidental. And that goes back to that distinction was made in the categories between, was it the things that are in something versus merely said of
Yes.
something. But I will say that according to the definition we had uncovered so far, where a universal is something that's common or said of all things, blue does fit in that category.
That's exactly
So-
right. And it's matter
But
of
you
fact,
do make an interesting point there.
no, I agree with both of you, because Charlie just skipped ahead a little bit, because Aristotle is going to say, he's going to mimic the words of a possible objection, but perhaps the universal, right? Well, it cannot be the substance in the way the essence is, can yet be present in it. So that comes, and that's where he introduces the genus thought that Charlie perfectly elaborated. All right, so but now we understand what he means by, right, this something that is common to many things. If that something were substance, those many things would not be many things. They would just be one thing.
Okay, so I did have to raise a little bit of a point here, maybe that I'm thinking, and that is that the universal, let's say, animality is animality with respect to itself. So it's a genus that's a
No.
genus.
Aristotle disagrees with that, but I'm not sure if he's done that yet or not.
Because you could say I'm an animal with respect to my animality. That animal, that cat, is an animal with respect to its animality.
Mhm.
So then the account of animality is different in that case than the account of an essence. So account in both cases has to be different. Like the idea of account is different now between the account of a genus and the account of an essence. So now the question for me is, well, what is the difference between an account then? You know, those two types of accounts. Why is the account of an essence special in a way that the account of a genus is not?
Animal as such doesn't animal as such isn't act, right? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't maintain itself in its being. That species, cats do and horses do, and in that they enact their species concept or their species form. But I think that maybe you can rephrase your question in a different way, but I think you got off on the wrong foot by thinking of animal as something with, something with respect to itself, as if that qualified it as substance. And
No. I'm just pointing out that I need a better definition of account now. Because I was thinking of it as a definition of what something like you can give an account, you can define something. Well, I can define animality, but that in Aristotle's matrix is not what he's talking about, just a definition of animality or an account of animality. So and I think what you just said sort of gets toward what he means by account. By account, he means I guess to use Tyler's language, I think, which was also in Aristotle, the way in which something is what it is. So, or the ways that, yeah, maybe that's getting at it. So anyway, I guess I'm just kind of thinking out loud because I have and now I realize I have to have a better definition of account.
Right. That was going to be part of my other introduction. We're just going to have to hit that another time. But I mean, the basic idea is that only substances have proper definitions, and so there's no proper definitions of, or there's definitions only in a secondary and scientifically less useful sense of everything that's not a substance. And it makes a big point out of, the difference between, Socrates as a human being and the pale Socrates, and there's no essence of pale Socrates, and therefore there's no definition. You can just use words to redescribe it, but it's not, you can't define pale Socrates. And so his use of definition is very specific. Right, and therefore, what we can give accounts, but all accounts are going to ultimately be dependent on the accounts or the definitions that are given of those primary things that are substances. And so he said, yeah. So and since animal isn't a substance, but this cat is, it's going to have its definition is going to be dependent on the kinds of things that are its species, and it's not going to have an independent definition. But I realize that's not very helpful. So, because we do have to kind of go through Zeta 4 through 6, where he kind of works out those kinks a little bit. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Either it's not helpful, or but we can follow up on it. But I'm going to hit Philip because he's had his hand up for a little while. And Tim, if you want to circle around back to this, please feel free to do so. After Philip.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about traditional mass marketing as really aimed at universals versus the promise of internet, or especially mobile marketing, is that it can be aimed at a substance, which can actually only be told through a conglomeration of universals.
Right.
And it's not only the shift in advertising, it's not only this, it's a substance in two sense. It's a substance that it's a unique individual, and it's a substance that has the potential to like buy beer in the next 15 minutes.
Right.
So it's the potentiality that they're targeting now in advertising, not just the identity, not just the membership in a class.
Interesting.
Perhaps this is, excuse me, perhaps this might be a somewhat spurious question, but insofar as a universal is something common that can belong to many things, what would stop me from labeling an essence as a kind of universal? Because it seems like essence can be substance in a way that a universal can't be.
Right. Right. And so that's already a reason why you wouldn't just label a universal essence. Right. I mean, did I misunderstand something?
Perhaps the word labeling was incorrect. Maybe a more precise way of putting it is, why would an essence not be a species of universal or something like that?
Right. Right. No, I think that's a very good question. I think that's, that's precisely why this section is just so controversial, right? It just seems like Aristotle says there's only knowledge of the universal. Only the universal can be defined. And now we're finding out that the universal can't be defined and ends up being particular, and you can't know it, right? So either Aristotle contradicts himself, or there are multiple senses of universal going on in this text that he doesn't mark explicitly. And we need to, that's why I want us to be attuned very specific, very intently to how he describes the universal that he rejects, so that we can then go back and reflect on his notion of form, like human, and how it's not like this Platonic universal. It is a very different kind of thing. It's neither individual nor universal. And usually it's like we say, tertium non datur, right? There's nothing in between the universal and the particular. And Aristotle is saying, well, there's this there's a sense of universal that absolutely cannot be substance. And yet species is substance. And so species, but subspecies is knowable. So it can't be individual and it can't be universal. So that means we need to collect the data, right? We need to collect the characteristics of what the species is that allows us to think it as neither universal in the Platonic sense, nor individual. If it were individual, it couldn't be known. If it were universal, it couldn't be substance. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. The way he's talking seems to put his theory of science in danger. And so we just need to be aware of that when we try to conceptualize species. Philip.
Is this I mean, doesn't language require universals? I mean, do we have two different domains going on? Like, if I can pause it for a moment, like the domain of language and domain of reality, and substances occur in the domain of reality, and universals occur in the domain of language.
Right.
And so we're trying to use language to grasp substances, but it may be inherently difficult.
Yeah. Okay. You mean inherently insoluble.
Yes, insoluble, right. I can't accept. Do I want to say insoluble? Okay, I just.
No, yeah, and so we, yeah, no, you're right. I think so. Just keep that quandary in mind as we try to collect the data of what Aristotle has to say about this species. You know, he was rather triumphal in Zeta 12 about following the differentia down and only ever differentiating in the sense of the genus. And if we do that right, we'll hit the ultimate differential, and that one thing will contain in its being all the differences that led up to it in our diheretic or differentiating process. Right. So that was, rather triumphal positing of a solution. And now it seems like he's pulling the rug out from underneath him by denying that universals can be substances. So either there's a gray zone in between those two that we need to ferret out and make more precise for ourselves, or, at least part of Aristotle didn't earn his triumphalism, and that there is no way to speak the essence, right? And these are two traditions that developed out of Aristotle. So, we're in good company, but so this is, yeah, I think, but I don't think that we're stuck with thinking the essence as unspeakable. And I think Aristotle does give us enough of an account of the species to understand how it's neither an individual, indefinable thing, nor a universal that can't be substance. All right, so I'm just going to open that wedge and say, be attentive to details that will help fill that space. Tim.
Well, I mean, there are complications here, right? So because when we say human, that's really not a species. There's Homo sapiens, there's Homo denisovans, whatever. There have been different species of human. So in a way, humans are a genus of sorts, kind of an in-between. Right. But then the question, really, the real hard question is, well, what is it that differentiates? When do you get to the species and there's nowhere lower to go?
Right.
It almost seems like it has to be some sort of accidental difference that differentiates Homo sapiens from another type of human. And those are, and so, why, like a longer nose, a higher eyebrow, a different, bigger teeth on average, I mean, what is it that determines the being as species as opposed to genus?
Mm-hmm. Right. He doesn't tell us. I assume that if we go to his biological writings and see how he does classifications, we'd have some material to work on, because that was his real forte.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the modern understanding is whether they can reproduce, right?
I don't think so, because we obviously reproduced with the Neanderthals, and they're not a part of our species.
Oh, maybe I'm misunderstanding something. So, yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know the way we distinguish species from species.
So we get at the ultimate differentia when we have an account that exhausts the characteristic activities of the thing that we're investigating. So there's an empirical and conceptual interplay going on here, right? And so so that's why there is no like absolute answer. Just give me an ultimate difference, right? That's going to be partly an empirical question, because the whole point of this is to aid the he says, the natural scientist abstracts from substance, but at the same time needs to know something about the substance of the things that he or she investigates. So what we're doing here is we're developing criteria for distinguishing beings according to necessary traits and not accidental traits, right? And necessary traits as they derive from the genus, even though this is the tricky part, right? The genus is subordinate to the species. So the species has actual existence, and the genus is what is part of the definition. And if we divide the species into its essential parts, as it were, we get the genus as matter, therefore something not independently existing, and the difference as matter, therefore something not independently existing. And it's the species that is the node where all these different lines intersect. But I'm just saying that, right? I mean, we don't really understand it yet. But it's and so hopefully we'll understand it better when we understand, the unity of the species. What makes it in essence has something to do with this act, right? This energeia, right? Which we haven't hit yet. So the questions are all legit, but we're still a little bit in media res in this inquiry. All right. Anyway, so let's go back and collect a couple more. We're going to be doing this next time. So we're going to be doing this section next time. All right. So maybe we can just get through Zeta 13 today and then hit the rest of this chapter next time. So right now we're still struggling with what is the universal that he says cannot be substance. We got common, it's something common that belongs naturally to many things. And that already, as Charlie said, disqualifies it as substance, because if it belongs to many things, it makes them all one thing. Right? It would make them one thing, but they're not one thing. Therefore, the universal can't be their substance. Tyler, do you mind reading a little bit further and while we collect a couple more criteria of what the universal is? You might be taking a break. Anybody else want to jump in and read a couple sentences or paragraphs?
I suppose I could do that.
That's nice of you, Isaac. Thanks. So we're right at we see on the left side of the page 15.
Starting with further.
Further, perfect, yeah.
Further, substance is said to be what is not said of an underlying subject, whereas a universal is always said of a certain underlying subject.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps the universal, while it cannot be the substance in the way in which the essence is, can yet be present in it. For example, as the animal is present in the human and the horse. Well, then clearly there is some account of it. And it makes no difference, even if it is not the account of everything in the substance. For this universal will not be any less the substance of something, as the human is of the human in whom it is present. And so the same result will again follow. That's the end of the page for me.
Oh, I apologize. I was reading in my text.
For this universal will not be any less the substance of something as the human is of the human in whom it is present, and so the same result will again follow, since it, for example, the animal, will be the substance of that in which it is present as something special to it. Further, it is both impossible and absurd for the this, that is the substance, if it is composed of something, not to be composed of substances, or of the this something, but of a quality. For then non-substance, that is the quality, will be prior to substance, that is to the this, which is just what is impossible. For neither in account, nor in time, nor in knowledge, can the attributes be prior to the substance, for then they will be separable.
All right, let's stop there and see if we can make a little sense, right? So now we've got another determination of universal, right? A universal is always said of a certain underlying subject. All right, so there's that. And then comes a fairly confusing paragraph, and I think it helps to make sense of this paragraph. If you imagine, or if you imagine that Aristotle is responding to a possible objection, right? But maybe the universal is a genus, right? Then, and it's present in the animal the way it's present the way animal is present in the human and the horse. And then there's an account of it, right? And that's what part of what we're looking for, is that of which there is a proper account.
Yeah, that's that special way in the categories.
So what's the special way?
The way the animal is present in a human is that special path in the categories that it's the in, not the set up, right?
Oh, right. Sorry, I'll be right back. I'll be right back in a minute. But please discuss that paragraph and see what sense you can make of it.
Just Peter, if you could explain what you meant by that, I didn't quite get it.
Remember, in the categories, there were sort of two, there were sort of, you could say things about something in sort of two different ways. One was an accidental attribute, like blue, Socrates is pale, blah, blah, blah. But when you said Socrates is an animal, there was something special, or there was something different about that, and that kept going up. And those were sort of like the essential characteristics or something. That's going to be kind of like the path of substance, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So another way to think of that is that it's not something you can remove from the account of something and still have an account of the what it is.
Yeah, that's probably a better way.
So yeah, if you have two kinds of organisms, right, and you remove life from the account of them, right? They're not organisms anymore. They've ceased to be what they are if you remove life from the account of an organism.
Right. So you could say if you moved human from angel, then all of a sudden angels wouldn't be humans. I'm being facetious, obviously.
So that
What
seems
if you
like
clip their
a
wings? Are they
substance is
still
inherently part of the genus. I mean, to take the genus out of the substance, there's no substance anymore.
This is the question that Isaac asked, I think. What is the difference between the universal and the essence?
What Isaac are we talking about? Newton?
No,
This one right here.
Remember.
Oh, okay.
No.
Got it, yeah. Okay.
Isaac, who has such a great voice, he should read everything for us from now on.
Yeah. Tyler's voice is good too.
We're into Tyler replacement theory now.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
okay with that.
Where are you guys? Where are you guys in the right? So this is like a counter objection, right? And Aristotle's going to show the problems of it. But I think this whole paragraph is the counter objection. Like, this is the way you could think genus as substance.
Well, I think that right before you came back, I mean, this is a great question. It was raised. I think Philip raised it. Is if you take the genus away from the substance.
Wait, afraid from the substance?
Yeah, if you take like we're talking about human, and it's a human. That chart we went back in the categories that Peter mentioned.
Right.
Animal is the genus of human. And so if you take animal away, if you take the genus animal away from human, you really don't have human anymore. And you don't have the substance. You can't have the substance because human is the essence. And so if you take animal away, so it's almost like genus is necessary to the substance.
Right, it's essential, but it's also acts in some sense as a universal. And so that previous argument we had would work against the genus, I think, right? If it's said of many things, animals said of many things, humans said of many things, even though it's an essential characteristic, if it's said of many things, it's still not that one thing.
Right, exactly. But it's odd that we're saying that it's not the essence,
Right.
but it is essential.
Exactly the same word.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is this, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm struggling with, what is it to take the genus away from the horse, because then you're taking the horse away from the horse, right? And I guess that's what you mean by it's essential, right? But Aristotle thinks differently, right? That without the animals, there is no genus animal. And so the animals are prior to the genus, but they're not prior to the species, because they are the act of that species. And so, right, that's about as far as I can go with that thought right now.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. You're saying that the species is prior to the genus,
Right,
because it is the essence. So that means then that genus is not essential to the species. But genus then must be derivative only in concept from the
Mhm.
species.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, part of Aristotle's thought is there is no act of the animal. There's only the act of the cat or the goat. And since the act is going to be the essence, and there is no act of the genus doesn't belong to the essence. But that's further ahead, so I don't want to get to, but I mean, I just wanted to kind of show you that maybe there's a way of thinking this that makes some sense.
Well, that kind of suggests that action and movement really are core, rather than almost like being is not really being or static being or
Right.
The activity of being is the name of the
Ways
book.
of being one.
Anyway,
Ways of, yeah.
Tim, are you reading Coastman? The title's called The Activity of Being. Are you reading Coastman?
no,
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay, well, yes, that's.
Well, quit your job and get to fucking work. This is the real Aragon of the human being. That's the true work. No, so yeah, okay, cool, right, yeah, being, it doesn't hurt to think of it in an active verbal sense.
I see. Take off the ing from be and you don't have being.
There it is.
Sellers had that ing ed distinction.
Yeah,
Ooh.
if you want
Nice.
to propound it, go ahead, but I can't.
I don't feel like propounding today. Sorry.
All right. We'll table the propounding. Okay, cool. So what's
Is it
going
like
on here?
being John Malkovich?
Nice. He would love this discussion.
So have we taken most of the sting out of this perplexing paragraph? So the idea is that the universal would be in the horse, the way, or the genus is in the horse and the human as the genus, and that it would be the way in which the universal would be substance, right? So the universe, so Aristotle's often said substance is a this something, right? It makes it be this thing, right? And so he says, for this universal will not be any less the substance of something as the human is of the human in whom it is present. So the idea is that this universal somehow makes the human a this something. And so the same result will again follow, since it, for example, the animal, will be the substance of that in which it is present to something special to it. Now, the objection is going to go in a certain direction. I'm going to say it just briefly, Philip, and I'll hit your hand, but before I lose the track. But the idea is that universals are made up of other universals, And so substances will be composed of substances, and thereby they lose their determinacy. So the Aristotelian form that we're after, the essence, will not be composed of forms, and so they have to be distinguished from the universal. And if we think of the genus as an idea that is composed of other ideas, we lose its ability to belong to the substance of the thing. Right. And we know it belongs to the substance of the thing because the definition of the species is the genus and the difference. That's the account of the species. All right, that's the point I wanted to make. I got a couple hands, and then perhaps we'll get a little bit further. Is it really 7:56? Oh my God. Anyway, okay, cool. We'll take the hands, and then we'll see where we're at. I saw Philip and then Tim.
If you take them, they won't really be hands because they'll be disconnected from the bodies.
That's hands in a secondary sense.
So for Aristotle, being qua being has no being.
That's right. Otherwise, it would be univocal,
Yep.
but it's analogical. That's right.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Prosen.
I like the way of cashing this out that I read in one author. You know, the being of everything is to have its being, right? To have its own nature. And so no properties can be derived from the concept of being that belongs to everything. It's not univocal, it's analogical. So the idea, what does everything have in common? Well, that it has a specific nature.
Is that heart?
No, I got that from Halper, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tim
This
has
one-
his hand up, by the way.
I just
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to point out that
Please.
that the analogic was the prosen. That's Aristotle's term,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Right. Because of his idea is that if, again, you know, if being is universal, like the animal is, and it's everything's substance, well, then everything becomes one thing. That's Parmenides, just one big being, no differences. All difference is illusion. So he says, you know, there's a different kind of unity, the prosen unity, in which the different senses of, for instance, health, right? They're different senses of health, but they're all oriented towards one basic sense of health, right? The healthy human being. It's the same with being. All these different senses of being, all these natures are oriented or supported by, they're all related to the fundamental sense of being, substance. They're not all substances, but to understand what their nature, you have to understand what substance is and how they're related to substance. That is the quick and easy notion of the analogy of being. All right, Tim, thanks for your patience.
Oh, I was just going to do a little quip and say that we play the bad philologist here and say that we are not humans. We are huming. We are not an hume. We are huming. So we're not human. We're huming.
Or humanine, or are we all, or are you saying that David Hume is the truth of us all?
No. Let's just put we're active, right? So
Right.
we're huming.
Exactly.
Huming,
Exactly.
not human. We're not an hume. We're huming. We're
There it
action.
is. There it is. Yeah. So we could almost find a little Whiteheadian process metaphysics already in Aristotle. All right, it's 8 o'clock. Let's wind it up. These texts are hard. I will try to restrain myself from making an introduction next time, unless Nick comes, because I want to get him up to speed. And so we have right now basically got together the basic criteria of what it is to be a universal in the bad sense. Right? And so his critique will be the critique of that thing that is defined by the 5 or 6 criteria that we just gathered together. And the whole time we read this, and I hope everybody reads these sections again, you got to be thinking, how is species like human, which is said of many things, nevertheless not a universal? And and just as a hint, and it's not okay. I mean, the research is very divided on this, so I'm just one voice amongst many, but I am drawn to the idea that that in, for instance, the animals that we empirically find that all have a principle of motion belonging to themselves, right? It is their being cats or being goats that accounts for the unity of the kind of life they lead. And so there being a species of something, each sheep exhibits species being, but in its specificity, but it doesn't exhibit, knowing it to be an animal doesn't get at the specificity of the thing, but knowing it to be a goat gets at the specificity of the thing that has explanatory value. So my basic point is that genus is like matter. It is too indeterminate to be explanatory of anything. And so and certainly the genus animal, there's no sense of being a self-moving being that from which you could derive wings, feet, and fins, right? Which are the kinds of self-motion that animals exhibit, or legs, fins, and wings. You can't get it from the idea of a living thing. So there is this inner weakness of the genus, and that is that you can't derive its species from it. But you can, in understanding the species, understand the nature of the individuals. So the species to determine it with respect to the individuals in a way that the genus isn't. And if we pay attention to that, right, and we're always thinking, what is more determinate, what is independent, and what is dependent, those are always the criteria of substance that we have to have in our head. We can understand why, for logical reasons, Aristotle prioritizes the species over the genus. Awesome. I'm done with that little monologue. Does anybody want to say anything before we check out? Whilst I enjoy my
Anything?
This was really,
Uh-huh.
I really.
Your biblical literalism is showing through.
This was really wonderful, Michael. Thank you.
Hope everybody more or less shares your opinion. I had a blast. And Tim, you're muted. So all those fabulous things you're saying.
Yeah, I was just saying it was good. And even I thought that your introduction, and even though it took an hour and 15 minutes, it was great.
It was. I really, really enjoyed it. And I guess Darlene joined us not that long ago. Sorry. So I think we've seen Darlene before, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, she's a regular.
Okay.
She's almost all of them. Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll stop recording now.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.